Hello, everyone. I'm Golda, and I handle library marketing for Norton. So, you might not know that in addition to publishing our own books, Norton also distributes several other publishers. And usually I include their titles in my book buzzes, but this time I have a special treat. We are going to hear directly from Associate Publisher and Editorial Director of Tin House, Nanci McCloskey and Masie Cochran. And once you hear them, I think you will understand why I wanted you to have them do this preview for you. And now if you look in the description, you'll see a link to the Edelweiss catalog for all of the books presented today, where you can find ISBNs, publication dates, and request digital advanced reading copies where available. And now I'll turn it over to Nanci and Masie.
Hi, librarians. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having us. I wanted to say that our first ever Library Reads book just happened, and we are over the moon. The House of Vesper Sands just came out on January 11th, and the author is over the moon. This is really exciting for us, so thank you for that. And we're going to tell you about 7 titles today. I'm hoping that you will fall in love with one of these and make them a library read book. Masie Cochran, our editorial director, she's here with me. Masie and I have worked together for how many years now, Masie?
Close to a decade.
Yes, like 10 years.
I know.
And our favorite thing to do is talk about books. So we've never had an audience for it quite like this before, but we're glad to do it. The first one we're going to talk about is Bride of the Sea by Iman Quota.
So I love talking about Bride of the Sea, and Nanci knows it. This is actually the first, I bought this book on the first week of lockdown in the pandemic. And there was something about it that even in the time of like, what is going on? What is the future? It just wrapped my attention. And I sat and was able to read it. I passed it to Nanci. We were like, this is amazing. Because I think, Nanci, you'll say this is true. One of the things that's so mind-blowing about Iman is that she's a debut.
I know.
And when you read this book, you're like, it feels very much in conversation with huge books like, A Woman Is No Man, Exit West. Those were kind of the books we were throwing around when we first started reading this book. And no, I mean, I'll just say just a little bit before Nanci jumps in, but I think what captured it for me was location and voice and detail. Iman herself, has lived in both places, born in Jeddah, but raised in Jeddah.
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and so both of the settings she's deeply familiar with. And it captures it like those two disparate worlds, in the US and Saudi Arabia so perfectly. I mean, didn't you feel that?
Oh, absolutely. And you felt so grounded in both places. I thought that was so masterful, the way that she was able to do that.
Yeah, I remember when I first started talking to Iman on acquisition, and she said, I don't want this book to be an American book or a Saudi book, but a Saudi American book. And I remember just thinking, that's it. That's what you've done. And I remember when you and I first started digging in, we couldn't really find a whole lot of novels I think none, by Saudi women authors. And so I think it feels like a really needed space on the shelves. But beyond all of that stuff, it's super fun to read.
You just have to turn the pages. Tell a little bit about what happens.
Okay, so this book actually begins with a disappearance. And I think that's one of the things that's so brilliant about it. It starts with a couple in crisis. One of our main characters, Seda, she's pregnant, and her marriage is already falling apart. The word divorce has already sort of been whispered. And after they have the baby, they co-parent for a while. And then after when her child, Hanadi, is about 4 or 5 years old, she makes this drastic and pretty terrible choice to just disappear. She's really worried that Munir's family will come in from Saudi Arabia and somehow take the child away, though they've really not done anything like that. And they disappear and they change their names, and Munir is heartbroken. And I think what I love about this is it's so complicated. You don't really know who to root for. You're definitely not rooting for the mother at the beginning, because she's taking her child away from this father who we have grown to like. Did you feel conflicted in that same way?
I did. And that was what was so compelling to me. I love feeling conflicted about a character. It's one of my favorite things. So this idea of kind of understand you're a little bit neurotic as a mother, I think. You want to
Yeah.
protect your child and that relationship beyond everything. And and the reason that she was afraid wasn't crazy. She had
No.
some reasons to be afraid. There was a
Yeah.
tradition of children in Saudi families being raised by the father's family. She understood that. But yeah, the consequences of that. And then the reunion of it, Maisie. Ah, all
And I
right.
love
I
that the
feel
reunion, we won't give too much away, but the reunion is again, not simple. You know, she hasn't seen this man when he arrives, he's a stranger. And the way that they come to know each other and she comes to know the family she lost is so beautiful. So I know we have to move on, but
I
we
know.
couldn't be more
But wait, I
excited.
have to say something.
Yes,
This
go.
book is a debut. The author, I mean, she's not entrenched in the writing world at all. So the fact that it is made a dozen most anticipated lists is blowing my mind. I actually wrote them down, so I'm going to read them. Bustle, Newsweek, Alma, The Every Girl, Savvy Mom, Pop Sugar, Newsweek, Hello Giggles, Chicago Review of Books. I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, people are reading this book and falling in love with it. It's being featured online everywhere. I am so excited that we get to publish this book. She
Yeah.
has a big career ahead of her.
And book clubs, right? That's the last word you need to say is book clubs. Just like Nanci and I are really having trouble stopping talking about this book and the themes, it's perfect for book club discussion. You know, it's in paperback, comes out 1/26/21, and I just feel like you couldn't have a happier book club discussion around this book.
How to Order the Universe. I love this cover too. This is Maria Jose Ferrada, and the translator is Elizabeth Breyer.
Yeah,
So,
this
you wanna
book,
tell us about
this book's a gem. And I remember when I started reading this book, I kept wanting to put it in conversation with other books, like more it in what I had read. And I came up with like The Fruit of the Drunken Tree, The Book of Unknown Americans. And then I remember I kept saying like The Elegance of a Hedgehog. And Nanci was like, no, I mean, yes, but no, you know,
Yes. Well, yeah, I will argue my point for that. I love the heart in this book. I love how much heart there is. And the elegance of the hedgehog, I absolutely respect it, but it felt kind of heady to me. I didn't feel like sort of the emotional punch that this book delivers. This book you read in a sitting and it is a fully immersive experience. And the thing I told Maisie when I finished is, I mean, this is the thing we love to do. We love talking about books. And usually, I can't wait to get to the last page. I'm going to call Maisie, tell her everything I think about the book. This time, I just put the book down and I stared at a wall for about 2 hours. And I just had all of these thoughts and emotions, and I wasn't ready to share them. I needed them to just be mine for a little bit. I needed just to be really sit with the feeling of this book. How powerful and provocative that a book that, I mean, look how slight it is. It's 170 pages, and it is a bite of absolute, pleasure.
yeah. I remember Craig Poplar's our publisher and I were talking and he was like, Masie, your book broke Nanci's brain. And I remember thinking like, it's true. And I had that same experience, but mine was sort of like just awe and wonder. I mean, this M, the main character, goes just by the letter M. And this young, precocious narrator, she just speaks magic in this book. And the way she sees the world and the way she's determined to live in it was inspiring and powerful and nostalgic. And it's weird to be empowered by a child in so many ways to
Yeah.
me, you know, like, and I think the setting too, you know, it's Pinochet's Chile. And I think that I could read about that setting because, you know, M knew just enough to be so interesting, but not quite enough to be terrified, you know, not quite enough to like totally reckon with like the gravity of the situation that her and her father find themselves in. And just so you're not totally unmoored, the main setting is that her and her father, who goes just by D, are traveling hardware salesmen. And they travel in this like old Renault around going from store to store, selling these cramped hardware products. And it becomes a sort of second education for our young character. I mean, little does her mother know, her father has sort of pulled her out of school. She sometimes smokes on the trip. She gets an education from like these grifters and drifters and, you know, sort of misfits that they meet along the way. But it's dreamy.
Yeah, and she never gets really hardened, but she does learn to be kind of manipulative. Like she knows the kind of smile to give and the way to sort of pout in order to help her father make these sales. She kind of starts to understand her power as a child, and that bit is fascinating. It really brought me back to what that's like as a kid when you start to recognize that you have power.
Yeah.
It is such a delight. This book is coming out on February 16th, 2021. It's a trade paperback original. I hope you check it out.
No, that one's going to be paper over board.
Oh, I
Remember?
forgot we changed the format.
We loved it too much. Like it just was one of these things where we're like, it just felt gifty. Also, you know, it's that short thing. And it's also just hold that cover up, Nancy, one more time.
Yeah.
I mean, you just want to put it in your bag with you.
Yeah.
Like it's just so gorgeous. So
Yes.
again, and a great translation. Elizabeth Breyer, award-winning translator. Really beautiful. All right, Nancy, what's up next?
The Whispering House, Elizabeth Brooks.
Ooh. I don't know if you guys can see how wonderfully creepy this cover is, but there's two silhouettes in this great mansion on the front, which is Burn Hall. You'll meet that character / location when you read it, but I can tell you it's so haunting. This is my second book with Elizabeth Brooks. She's the author of The Orphan of Salt Winds. And even though this book is a little bit of a move away from, you know, her wheelhouse of historical fiction, it's still deeply rooted in the same sort of things that I just love reading Elizabeth Brooks for. It's about secrets. It's about how when they bubble to the surface, like pretty much everybody has terrible consequences. It is mysterious. It's beguiling. It's like so hard to put down. It's almost guilty how much you enjoy sort of reading this.
Our boss is not here, so we can say like the real thing about this book that we talked about when we liked it, but our boss is always like, shh, shh. What's great about it is Freya, who's the narrator, she sort of wanders into this big mansion on this estate. She's at a wedding party that happens to be on this estate, and she wanders in and she sees this portrait of a woman who looks strikingly like her sister who's recently died. And she's kind of thrown off by it and she can't stop thinking about it. So weeks later she goes back and then she meets the handsome guy. We're not allowed to say handsome to our boss, but we think that like you get why it's important that this man is like an artist and really charming and charismatic and in this crumbling mansion, and what the pull is and the darkness of it all. It's just so gothic and so eerie. It's like what you want to read with a steaming cup of tea.
Yeah, it'll keep you up at night for sure, you know, and it's got great praise. I thought, you know, Renee Denfeld, you know, blurb on the cover of that captured it perfectly. She said it has prose that beats at the heart. And I think that's really true, you know? So, and that's on 316 paperback, right?
Exactly. Trade paperback original.
Oh, love that one.
All right. We have White Magic next. This is coming out April 27th. This will be Clock. This is a big, big book for us. It's Elisa Washuta. I think our publicist said she has never gotten the kind of request for galleys that she's gotten for this book. It's an essay collection. Elisa is part of the Cowlitz and Appalachian tribes, but she grew up kind of removed from her Native American history. It's been this thing that she's been curious about and wanted to be more invested in, but wasn't. So she found these like kind of cheap facsimiles of it, trying to get into it, but you know, it feels kind of corny. What I love about this book, what I think is actually magical about this book, is the way that Elisa talks about spirituality. Because as somebody who grew up in a very Catholic Catholic upbringing, and then kind of moved away from Catholicism. I'm still so drawn to that search for spirituality, and I'm so drawn to a really honest appreciation of spirituality. And I think Elisa is like that too. And she'll do anything to kind of find that bit, that thing that's missing in our lives. And it is so raw and deep. And I think one of the blurbs is talking about like Elisa Washuda writes with a truth that will lay you bare. And it was that your experience, Masie?
Oh, 100%. This was so exciting the minute it hit the inboxes of the editorial department. I mean, just sort of wide-eyed, hadn't seen anything really like this before. I was trying to think while you were talking about like what one of my favorite pieces is, and I think it's The White Witchery. It's it's an essay about searching. So she's like looking through online in spells and rituals and within her like intergenerational history. And it's sort of like looking and searching for a way to break through the cycle of pain. And
Mhm.
I love how she does that through the lens of like mind and body. And she always explores this idea, at least in this essay, through witchcraft. And I love how, you know, how she finds Sephora and her discussion on their like starter witch kits. And then also, you know, how that works in concert or in company with her own life as a modern woman and a member of the Cowlitz. And I think more tthan anything, it's just like how modern this book feels. You
Mhm.
know, like that's the thing that was so impressive to me is I wrote down a quote. Because it's in the first essay and it says, "I'm not a medicine woman or a healer. I'm a person with an internet connection and a credit card that I can use to buy candles and charmed oils to cast the kind of spells that might rip a little hole in the world." Like, you know, it's so modern yet trading in things that feel like they've been around before time, you know, just like
Yeah.
amazingly smart and beautiful. And I remember when I was talking to Tony, we were saying like, gosh, this feels big. It reminds me of like Male Hot's Heartberries, you know, and like the way the praise is so layered. And in the dream house, like, can you
Yeah.
imagine Carmen and Elisa talking about, you know, like the choose your own adventure sort of aspect and like sort of like the way that they play with form. And then you know, Esme Wang's The Collected Schizophrenias. And I think that's the one that I thought of because I was just struck by the candor of both of those authors in
Yeah.
discussing their themes.
All right. I feel like we have to move a little faster now, Mazie.
Yep.
I'm going to make this really hard because it's unsettled ground that we're talking about next by Claire Fuller. This is on sale May 18th in cloth.
Yes. And this one, I mean, this is my fourth book to work on with Claire Fuller. And I'll tell you, Claire Fuller is married to a librarian. You know, I just want to plug that in right here.
The library husband. What does she call him on? Is
My
it
library husband, my
Yeah.
librarian husband. And I just think, you know, it's sort of interesting because I think every single one of her books works so well in the libraries. And we've seen that. And this one is just, and she's one of the first people I ever worked with at Tin House. So like pulls my heartstrings. But this one, it is just, I feel like Claire's outdone herself. It is in her, it opens on like something sort of quiet, a beautiful snow like flurry is coming down on a cottage. A mother and her two children are sleeping, and within 2 pages everything is turned on its head. I'm not giving anything away when I say that there is a unexpected and dramatic death within the first 2 pages. And the main characters, they're these 2 twins, Jeannie and Julius, and I love them. Like I feel like I know these people. They exist on the fringes of society. They're not what you would expect. They're 51 years old, a boy and a girl. They've never really sort of made their way in the world. They've lived in this protected, isolated cottage with their mother, sort of isolated in the truest sense of the word by living in a cottage in the woods, but also isolated because of lies and sort of creations that have happened to them and restrictions put around them that aren't necessarily true. I stayed up super late reading this book. And I think there is the instinct to go so quickly because you do want to know, you want to see the lies unravel, but her masterful, beautiful line work makes you linger and stay. I can't say anything more about that book. I just think it's stunning. I think it's masterful.
Yeah. I mean, the kinds of comps that we've been throwing around for this book would be crazy in another context. And, we're like kind of shyly saying names like, it feels like Marilyn Robinson. It feels like, Anne Patchett. It feels big in that kind of way. It feels like a step above. We are so proud to publish that. I'll tell you the pub date again. It's May 18th, 2021. All right. The Kissing Bug by Daisy Hernandez.
Also worked as a librarian.
Yes,
Daisy,
we
for
just had a
6
meeting
years.
with Daisy, and she said, one of the things that's really important to me is to get out into libraries when I'm promoting this book, because I worked in a library for years and years and years. That was my first job. I'm still really connected. It was a one-room library. Tell me about it, Masie. She said she got her first library card at 7 years old. A
Yep.
one-room library in New Jersey, in Bergen County, was it?
Yep. I think that's right. Yeah. And I think that love of language like informs this too, because you see, just to give you a little bit of background, this is our this feels like just such a big narrative nonfiction book. It's timely. It is. And what's really interesting about it is every time we talk about this book, we say, I want to talk to you about a book, but first I'm going to talk to you about a bug. And if you look, here it is. And both me and my 6-year-old son have now become pretty obsessed with this bug. We look for it everywhere. And the truth is, in the southern state where I live, we can find it. And as the planet warms, these bugs are climbing into the United States. And they are called, sort of, not by the scientific word, they're called kissing bugs, but they're the chagas beetle. And the kissing bug is absolutely devastating. It bites you right near your lip. And that sets into play like a almost poetic, but truly devastating disease in which it implants a parasite that hardens your heart. And I remember when I talked to Daisy right at acquisition, she said, just imagine that the heart is an accordion, moving in and out, and it's always been beating to a song. Well, the parasite changes the tune and it hardens the heart and it can no longer move. And what's so devastating is even if you get a heart transplant, the parasite will harden that heart. So it's like something out of it's Shakespearean. It's so horrible. And I think even more so, it has affected, communities in Latin America and I think that for so long, the US has neglected this disease, has sort of relegated it to, to people of color, to class differences, and policy has really affected how this disease has been treated in the United States. It wasn't until recently that the CDC even tested for Chagas for blood donation, and it can be, transferred in blood donation. So I think the fact that it's so much more prevalent than Zika, but I'm guessing almost everybody here has heard of Zika, and I'm guessing that very few have heard of Chagas, if you're anything like me. And so reading this book was
it's in Arkansas, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's moved. It's definitely in Texas. It's been seen in parts of Arkansas. It's been seen in California. I remember, I love our Norton rep sales team, and I remember when we were talking about this, the chat side lit up because there are people in Norton all over the country, and they're like, "Oh, the kissing bug is here. Kissing bug's here too," And I think it's just a matter of time before almost every state is dealing with this bug. And just seeing the outpouring of support, we already have a Chris Newby blurb, Amy Stewart. I have to read you Amy Stewart's blurb. With Kissing Bug, Daisy Hernandez takes her place alongside great science writers like Rebecca Skloot and Mary Roach, immersing herself in the deeply personal subject of a deadly insect-borne disease that haunted her own family. It's a tender and compelling personal saga, an incisive work of investigative journalism, an absolutely essential perspective on global migration, poverty, and pandemics. I mean, there couldn't be anything more timely to read right now, anything more important.
But didn't she also comp it to Mary Roach and Rebecca Skloot? She said, if you like those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think she's in that territory for sure. I think and Nanci keeps talking about the writing. The writing is just,
that's what got me.
Gorgeous.
I mean, the pitch is phenomenal. The pitch is fascinating. What I wasn't quite prepared for was how beautiful the writing was going to be and how invested in her story I became. And yeah, the one exciting thing I felt like was pretty unanimous here at Tin House is everyone said, "Oh, I think this book could win awards. This feels like an award book."
It does, doesn't it? Fingers
Okay,
crossed. Wait,
last.
so
Oh,
hardcover, right?
yes,
Hardcover
hardcover.
on 6/1/2021. All
That's
right.
The Way She Feels by Courtney Cook.
I gotta hold it up too.
All right, we've never done a book like this. This is fully illustrated, 4-color. You can't tell with the galley, but all of these great colors here, these greens and pinks and blues, all of these illustrations are going to have them. And it's a memoir in essays about borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
Now, I want to hear everything you have to say about it, Masie, but I want to tell you that this book was a totally stunning revelation to me because I thought I knew what borderline personality disorder was. I thought they were the bad people. I thought they were like sort of sociopathic, and I didn't I truly, in my mind, it was, and I looked it up before, diagnosing this person or that person. And I never ever found empathy. It was just, and what I find really fascinating about this is you can find books about what it's like to love somebody with a borderline personality disorder or be a child of somebody with a borderline personality disorder. But I don't know of any books that talk about what it's like to live with it. And living with it was mind opening for me.
Yeah. I think Courtney talked a little bit about that with me when I first bought the book, was that there really isn't that. It's so stigmatized. But what is it? 4 million people in the United States
Yes.
live with borderline every day.
And that's who's diagnosed. My guess is it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, and that's just diagnosed. And what's interesting is Courtney comes from the demographic most diagnosed, young women. And I think that it's like it was transforming for me and you, but I also feel like it's like life-saving when you read things like this, because it really does put words and feelings and thoughts to something that for so long has been relegated to like a really shadowy, negative thing. And I think that Courtney's way is also really empowering, because like you can just like look in the TOC to see like how special her mind, when she comes to terms with like how best to describe almost something that a lot of people feel like is indescribable. And so she says like, chapter 5, show me a happy person, I'll show you a liar. Chapter 2 is this is why I'm crying. There's another one, the blow dryer is full of souls and other facts and lists. I Googled borderline personality disorder and wanted to run for the hills. Like there's something so approachable, something so thoughtful. She writes she writes almost as buzzingly as she draws, like you've got these bright blues and lime greens. She even draws her favorite medication in her sort of swimming pool of cereal. Lexapro and sugar cereals are like very important to Courtney. She also talks about like people, totally famous people like Pete Davidson or Lindsay Lohan or Britney Spears, who have been either diagnosed by other people like Twitter doctors or diagnosed, like Pete Davidson, and how important that was for her and their advocacy. And she's doing a lot of the same thing. So
and
I feel like
you follow her from her teenage years, before she has this diagnosis, when she's like, what the heck is wrong with me? Something is wrong. I'm different. I don't know what it is. I don't know why this thing scares me. I don't know why I so desperately need your love. I don't know why I hate myself so much. And I feel like it's such a mission for her not to let other people feel this alone. And that's why this is important. And you don't have to have borderline personality disorder. You don't even have to know anybody or be that interested, because it's all on a scale. We all understand depression. We all understand anxiety. We all understand what it feels like to be so alone. And she writes about it with so much empathy. And I mean, I can say from my perspective that one of the greatest pleasures about books is I feel like it grows my heart and my ability to empathize. And Courtney does a phenomenal job with this.
Yeah, and I'll just close because I think it captures it. Piper Weiss, the author of You All Grow Up and Leave Me, captures that idea. Like, you don't have to be borderline. She says the way she feels is a lifeline to anyone who's ever felt alone. And I mean, who hasn't felt
Yeah.
that? And so I think this is just a beautiful book, one that's both prescriptive and enlightening. And it comes out in paperback with flaps, right, Nance?
Yes, plus.
On 6/29/21, and the back is so great too. That's Courtney. Everybody say hi.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Golda. This is a
Thank
pleasure.
you, Golda.
Thank you too. I could listen to you guys talk all day about books, and you have even more great books on your summer list that we will include in the description. So remember, click on the Edelweiss link and you can find digital advanced review copies, and you can find all of the information about all of the Tin House books. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.